Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Indie Pop Girl, the podcast for music chat, new releases, hidden gems, and nostalgic deep dives. I am back and it's time to close out the Indie Classic series. It's been so much fun talking about some of my favourite indie records. And for this week, I am bringing you a very special record that means a lot to me. I'm closing out the series with Lost in the Dream by The War on Drugs from 2014. So, get your plaid shirt on and let's revisit this record together. And before we get into the episode, if you enjoy music deep dives like this, please consider following the podcast or leaving a like depending on where you're listening. It really helps the show reach more people and it means a lot for a small independent podcast like this one. Lost in the Dream is the third studio album by American indie rock band The War on Drugs, and it was released on the 18th of March 2014 through Secretly Canadian. The production duties were handled by frontman Adam Granduciel. It's the follow-up to the band's critically acclaimed record, Slave Ambient, which was released in 2011. The record started to take shape after the Slave Ambient tour had finished, where Adam was finding the adjustment back into everyday life difficult. His spiralling mental health during the writing and recording for Lost in the Dream has been well documented. Adam has been open in his battle with paranoia, anxiety and depression during this period, and he was also dealing with the aftermath of a recent breakup with his girlfriend at the time, which also bled through into the inspiration for the record. That trauma, that emotional distress, and that sense of loneliness really shaped the album's lyrical themes. But despite the heavy subject matter, it's in the sound of this record where everything really comes alive. It was inspired by Americana and Heartland rock, Tom Petty, Bob Dylan, Springsteen, and Neil Young and Crazy Horse. But what sets Lost in the Dream apart from the rest of the pack is that, yes, you can hear the 80s sounds and influences coming through, but at its heart, it's drenched in psychedelia with a dreamy, hazy production. Adam really shows his gift as a songwriter, musician, and producer. And he is well known for his meticulous approach in the studio. And this is a record full of detail. I won't be covering in this episode how I discovered The War on Drugs, so if you are curious and want to know more, please check out my previous episode covering the I Don't Live Here Anymore record. I go into detail how I became a fan and how much they mean to me, so please give that a listen after this episode is finished. Lost in the Dream received widespread critical acclaim upon release, and it appeared on numerous end-of-year lists with various publications and websites. It was also their commercial breakthrough and ended up with gold certification in the UK for sales and streaming. I've talked about previously on the podcast with certain records where sometimes the artist has to suffer for their art, and that is the case for Lost in the Dream. Sometimes it feels like artists do their most powerful work when they're carrying something heavy. But somehow they find the strength and the inspiration to create magic. Adam truly poured his heart and soul into this project, and the end result is a stunning collection of songs which have stood the test of time. Adam's bravery and courage to talk about his mental health and panic attacks in subsequent interviews needs to be respected. It's a record that is very close to my heart and one that I will continue to find the comfort and healing in for the rest of my life. Another record I covered in this series, Futurology by the Manic Street Preachers, also from 2014, shares some of that same musical DNA. Both records are inspired by krautrock and motoric style rhythms and beats, drenched in synths and electronica. Now, I am not saying that both records sound the same, because they don't, but both push the boundaries of what an indie record could sound like in 2014. I had to include Lost in the Dream as part of the Indie Classic series, as its lasting impact, influence, and longevity can't be denied. The album is defined by its fusion of blending indie rock and Americana with classic rock instrumentation and blended beautifully with textures of lush, layered synths and electronica. The reverb heavy atmospheric production by Adam to create that hazy or dreamlike state also has crossover with shoegaze and dream pop. It's a modern indie classic that will continue to be referenced and influenced in many years to come. It's a record that Sam Fender has talked about extensively and continues to inspire his own music. For me, this is an album about losing yourself and somehow finding clarity in the process. It's a deeply personal record, but one that the listener can connect their own experience to it, all encapsulated by some absolutely gorgeous instrumentals and production. As I've mentioned in previous episodes, I will not be playing clips of the songs, so if you are curious, then please support the artists I cover by streaming, downloading, or buying physical copies. Thank you. Track 1, Under the Pressure. To open a record with a nearly 9-minute epic, I'd say that's pretty brave, and it grabs your attention straight away. It's relentless all the way through, constantly twisting and turning. It slowly builds and eventually you reach the end of the track, which features an extended ambient intro. There is honestly so much going on in the production and instrumentation here. You really can't take it all in on the first listen. Under the Pressure is one of those tracks that keeps revealing itself over time and with repeated listens. You can almost separate the ambient electronica layered in the background. It's something you really notice on headphones. But then you've got that iconic piano riff from Adam carrying the song alongside those driving drums. The synths and electronic elements give it that hazy, slightly psychedelic feel. And then the saxophone comes in, and it's all balanced so perfectly. And honestly, this track is a production and engineering masterclass with so much layering and texture. It's the little details that keep things fresh, and that's what makes it so impressive. There's one moment in particular that's one of my favourites on the entire record. Listen out for the drums before the ambient outro comes in and how they're mixed. It's very brief, but they sound really dry with almost no reverb, and it sounds incredible. The sax and the synths all building around it. It's truly magical. It's fucking genius. And if you've ever seen The War on Drugs live, you'll know this track is like some kind of religious experience. Even just thinking about it gives me chills. They extend it even further in their live sets, and it just takes it to another level completely. The drumming by Charlie Hall is just phenomenal. If you don't know what I'm talking about, after this episode, go and find a live performance on YouTube and just be prepared to be blown away. Track 2, Red Eyes. This is the ultimate driving song. Windows down, sunglasses on, the wind blowing through your hair. It's just glorious. The title, Red Eyes, is obviously a reference to crying, and the lyrics are actually quite bleak. Verse 1 opens with Adam singing, "Come and see, where I witness everything. On my knees, you beat it down to get to my soul, against my will." But they're juxtaposed with this bright, upbeat, almost sparkly instrumental. Adam really puts his own spin on the production here, layering his vocals with a shit ton of reverb to create that distant, hazy atmosphere. The lyrics allude to the breakup, and I think that use of reverb almost acts as a metaphor for it. It creates a sense of distance, of longing, and that struggle to move on from a place of isolation. And then you've got that cathartic, iconic woo, which just feels like a moment of release. Like everything might actually be okay in the end. It's got that driving beat at its core, but it's balanced perfectly with the synths and that huge uplifting chorus, making it an absolute standout in their live sets. And again, this is where the track really comes alive. The band are so locked in with each other, and it's honestly such a joy to watch. Just incredibly talented musicians, completely in sync. There's something really cinematic and nostalgic about it too. You can hear those Springsteen and Tom Petty influences, but they're filtered through Adam's more dreamy, psychedelic lens. It's one of those songs that feels heavy and hopeful at the same time, and that's what makes it so special. Track 3, Suffering. Now, I'd say Suffering is probably the most underrated track on the record, but don't let that fool you. It's a bit more understated, but its placement within the album is perfect. Adam's vocals are less reverb heavy here, and they're mixed much more front and centre, which I think is completely deliberate. It still has that hazy, slightly woozy, distant feeling, but the real magic of this track is in how it builds. That brutal line, "Why be here when we're both gonna fake it anyway?" It's like, what is the fucking point of trying to make this work? This is exhausting. At first, it almost feels like it's not really going anywhere. And then suddenly, about halfway through, that instrumental break comes in, and it's fucking devastating. The way that piano comes in fucking kills me every time. Holy shit. The melody mimics Adam's yeah yeah yeahs, and it's just genius. How to be that powerful with just movement and melody is just incredible. To be able to open a track up like that and have it feel so natural in the arrangement just comes down to Adam's skill as a songwriter and musician. I will never stop praising him. Honestly, he's like a musical god to me. And this track is proof that he can be introspective, slow things down, and really let the instrumental breathe. And then when that saxophone comes in during the outro, it is so satisfying. It's brief, but my God, it works and adds some gorgeous texture into the instrumental. And I'm going to throw in something that might not make complete sense, but it does to me. There's something about Adam's vocal delivery here that really reminds me of Paul Buchanan from the Blue Nile. It might be those repeated yeah, yeah, yeahs, but there's that same introspective, late night, deeply personal feel to it. Suffering is a grower, and maybe not as immediate as some of the other tracks, but when it clicks, you will realise the beauty and power that this track holds. Track 4, An Ocean in Between the Waves. This track definitely picks the pace back up again, and it's one of my personal highlights. Just over 7 minutes of a total vibe. Adam actually scrapped the original demo just 2 weeks before the album was due to be handed in to the label, and I'm so glad he trusted his instinct. This version feels far more complete, and like Under the Pressure, it's relentless in the way it keeps twisting and turning. It opens with this steady, almost mechanical drum beat that feels like a car cruising down a highway at night, gradually layering in pulsing bass and those shimmering synth textures. Like I said, the track runs just over 7 minutes, but it flies by. One thing Adam does so well across this record is letting the outros fully breathe and just do their thing. Nothing ever feels forced or rushed, and he really gives you a proper album experience with a carefully curated track list. And it's those little details that I really appreciate as a listener. You can tell Adam is a true music fan himself, that he genuinely cares about the craft. Lyrically, the track explores distance and disconnection, with the ocean acting as a metaphor for the emotional space between two people. And that line, I'm in my finest hour, can I be more than just a fool? It really hits. To me, it suggests a relationship that's become completely one-sided. Adam feels like the one still trying, still holding on, while the other person comes across as cold and is probably already checked out. He's giving everything and getting nothing back, left feeling like the fool, hoping things might somehow change. And then in the outro, his voice almost disappears beneath the instrumentation, which could be a metaphor in itself. It feels like the point where the connection fully breaks down. He can't get through anymore. The layers of sound reflect that distance until all that's left is, I've been waiting, before it gives way to the instrumental. And it's a message to the listener that Adam is walked away for good. And that's what makes it so powerful. And talking of disappearing, track 5, Disappearing. Okay, I'm just going to warn you now, I have a lot to say about this track. This is one of my all-time favourite songs. Honestly, it's probably in my top 5 if I ever wanted to torture myself by actually trying to rank them. I'm not even exaggerating when I say this, but I want this track injected into my veins. There's just something so hypnotic and addictive about the instrumental. I don't know what Adam put into the production, but holy shit, this is my track. The fact that there are hardly any lyrics here says everything. At this point, the relationship has completely broken down. In the previous track, it felt like Adam was the one disappearing towards the end of the outro. But here, he's almost asking the question to both of them. Will you wait for the one that disappears? And then in verse 2, it feels like a continuation of that story. I mentioned before that his partner feels cold and distant, And you hear that in the line, I was home when you came. It threw me out of touch. It took away from the cold of your arms. Now I wait for my turn to let it blow against me. Now he's just waiting for his moment to let it all go. As the track progresses, Adam's vocals become more and more filtered. The lyrics get distorted, buried deep within the instrumental. He sounds increasingly distant in the mix until eventually you can't hear him at all. And that feels like the moment he's gone for good. For me, this track sums up the entire record and even the artwork. That image of Adam alone in his living room by the window already tells you this isn't going to be a happy album. And despite the upbeat instrumentals throughout, it's constantly contrasted with this sense of emotional collapse, of a relationship breaking down, and everything that comes with it. The loneliness, the spiraling mental health, it's all there. And for a track like this to run for nearly 7 minutes with such sparse lyrics is incredible. And for a breakup song to sound like this, my God, there's this sultry, almost sexy groove running through it, and you just don't want it to end. It sits somewhere between dream pop and psychedelia, and for me, it ticks every single box. It also feels like the perfect embodiment of the album's title. This track genuinely feels like being lost in a dream. It's a total masterclass in arrangement, production, and engineering, and it sounds unreal on headphones, and even better on vinyl. If you love detail and layers, you have to experience this track on vinyl late at night with a candle lit. It is such a vibe. Dave Hartley's bass work on this track is incredible, and it really stands out on vinyl. That harmonica drop is one of my favourite moments on the entire record. It gives me chills every single time. You would never expect it, but it's such a genius move, and you can't imagine the track without it. My husband actually said that electronic drums remind him of Radio Gaga by Queen, and I completely hear that. It's got that steady, hypnotic pulse running all the way through. And then when that piano comes in over the acoustic guitar and synths, it really reminds me of Pale Shelter by Tears for Fears. I don't know if Adam was tapping into that kind of sound, but I am so here for it. I love when artists blend electronic elements with live instrumentation like that. Tears for Fears are masters of it, and so are the War on Drugs. And I've never fully bought into the Springsteen comparisons, to be honest. I understand it, but this track feels so far removed from that world. Maybe I'm on fire at a push, but even then, this is doing something completely different. The guitar in this has always reminded me of Dave Gilmour and Charlie Burchill, using tones to create layers and texture. I did warn you I had a lot to say about this track, and honestly, guys, I could go on. It's a song I absolutely adore, one I love with all my heart. And if you're listening and you're even slightly curious about what I am saying, go and play this loud on a late night drive and just let it wash over you. You're welcome. Track 6, Eyes to the Wind. You know, I find it hard to believe that Adam wrote Eyes to the Wind in just 4 minutes sitting in his kitchen. And although it took months to fully complete, he said that he wanted the song to be completely open and honest, and you can really feel that. Songs like this don't come around very often. I'd say this is Adam's Bob Dylan moment, and that's absolutely not a bad thing. He's spoken a lot about being inspired by Dylan, and I think tapping into that world really helps shape both the sound and the lyrics here. In the first verse, there's even a reference to the album closer in reverse. And again, that sense of him carrying the relationship, trying to hold it all together, but ultimately failing. Like a train in reverse down a dark road, carrying the whole load, just rattling the whole way home. It's absolutely heartbreaking. And then in the chorus, he hints at his mental state with the line, I'm a bit run down here at the moment. Let me think about it, babe. And later on, when he says, there's just a stranger living in me, that's just soul crushing. It feels like he doesn't even recognise himself anymore. All that's left is this overwhelming sense of loneliness. But as the song progresses and we move towards that stunning instrumental outro, it feels like there's a shift, almost like acceptance. He sings, and I'm all alone here, living in darkness, but then follows it with a little, all right. And it's subtle, but it feels like a glimpse of hope, like maybe things will get better, that the darkness won't last forever. Musically, this track is just incredible. It's got everything: harmonica, pedal steel, piano from Robbie Bennett, baritone sax from John Natchez, Rhodes from Adam himself. And when you layer that with the guitars and synths, it all builds so beautifully towards that emotional climax in the outro. This track is nearly 6 minutes, guys, but it flies by so quickly. And that's what happens when you lose yourself in a track so special like this. And the Live Drugs version, honestly, it just takes it to another level. The saxophone is even more prominent. The whole band feels completely locked in, and Dave Hartley's bass runs are just outstanding. I have been blessed to hear this live several times, and that outro, the way the band all come together in that moment, it honestly brought me to tears. Track 7, The Haunting Idol. This instrumental acts as a kind of interlude, bridging us into the next track. It's atmospheric, dark, and really moody, and it almost feels like a reflection of Adam's depression at this point in the album. The synths really complement the guitar, and it really doesn't need anything else. It's sparse, but sounds full at the same time. That shit is so difficult to pull off. The guitar tones he's using with the pedals and the amps and reverb feel very shoegaze inspired to me. And the only way I can really describe it is that he's using the guitar almost as a guide, working his way through that grief and emotional weight. It's placed perfectly in the track list because as the haunting idol fades out, it naturally flows straight into the next track. Track 8, Burning. After that darkness, this feels like the first real moment of light. I live for this electronic build-up in the intro. It's so satisfying. It's probably not something you'd expect on an indie record, but with that driving rhythm and steady motoric beat, it still feels rooted in that Americana influence. At the same time, Adam's clearly pulling from the 80s as well. The synth melody has always reminded me of Young Turks by Rod Stewart, which, by the way, is an absolute banger. My interpretation of Burning, especially coming straight after The Haunting Idol, which feels dark and heavy, is that this track represents a shift. It's more upbeat, kind of a bit more positive, and feels like Adam is starting to come out the other side of that darkness. Lyrics like cross the bridge and redefine your pain in the chorus suggest a transition from suffering to resilience and eventually towards some kind of healing. It feels like he's urging himself or the listener to face things head on rather than avoiding them. And I think that's something a lot of us are guilty of. I know I am. It's so easy to hide away from things instead of dealing with them. But this track feels like that reminder that you can get through it, that you're stronger than you think. There's also this idea of confronting your inner demons. That line, "you're not the demon in the dark," feels really important. Like a reminder that you are not your anxiety, you are not your depression. They do not define you. Adam has spoken openly about his struggles during the making of this album, and this track really feels like a moment of release of catharsis. I love how the production changes during this moment in the track. It's such a clever switch up to keep you engaged. And then you've got that line, "when you release me from your heart again," followed by that iconic woo. It feels like a breaking point, a release from the past, from the relationship, from everything that's been weighing him down. Play this loud on a road trip, shake off whatever's been sitting on your shoulders, and just let it go. Trust me, it works. Track 9, Lost in the Dream. God, I really hope I can get the words out for this one. The title track always gets me choked up. It's just so sad. And yet, the instrumental is absolutely gorgeous. There's so much beauty in it. The Rhodes and harmonica in the intro and throughout the song is just perfection. This track really proves that sometimes there is beauty and sadness, and I've found so much comfort and strength in the song. Adam's vocals here are less reverb heavy, and I think that's completely intentional. The lyrics and the simplicity of the track are the real focus, and this might actually be my favourite vocal performance from him. There's so much control in his voice, but also so much emotion. It's drenched in melancholy. There's a hint of that Bob Dylan influence again, but at its core, it still feels atmospheric with this stunning understated melody. Verse 3 has some of the most heartbreaking lyrics on the entire record. When we were the same, it feels like he's looking back at the relationship, maybe at the beginning when things were good, before everything started to fall apart. And then that line, "we stroked our arms and we wore them thin." It could suggest this cycle of constant worry, that feeling like everything is about to collapse at any moment. Or maybe it's that they leaned on each other for comfort so much that they ended up wearing themselves and each other down, trying to fix something that couldn't be fixed. And then he follows it with, Ah, the sadness it was in. That line just says everything. The pain is acknowledged, the weight of it all. And when he says, now it's living under your skin, and love's a game, you really feel how much this has taken out of him. And if you've ever been in a one-sided relationship where you're giving everything and getting nothing back, it's one of the worst places to be. I've been there, and Adam is so right. It gets to a point where love just feels like a game. The mind games, the emotional toll, it just wears you down. And that's what makes this track so powerful. Adam completely opens himself up here, and it allows the listener to bring their own experiences into it. Even if you don't connect with every part of the song, there'll be a line, a moment, something that just hits you right in the chest. Track 10, In Reverse. What a way to close out this record. This track really takes its time, building gradually, and that atmospheric intro is just beautiful. It feels like the moment where Adam finally reaches acceptance that his partner is gone. And as the song unfolds, you can hear him finding the strength and resilience to move forward and leave the past behind. He opens with, "You've been out in the street, talking about the war with me," which I take as that fallout after a messy breakup. Maybe there's been gossip, she's said shit behind his back, all the usual aftermath, which we can all definitely relate to. But then he closes the verse with, "But through the haze, there's no one there, wondering if you care, calling out your name in the darkness." Wow, that is just so dark. And the use of reverb on his voice just makes it hit even harder. There's still that lingering sense of hope, or maybe denial, that things might somehow come back together, and Adam captures that emotion perfectly. And in the chorus he sings, "And I don't mind you disappearing when I know you can be found, when you're living on the dark side of the street," which goes full circle to track 5, Disappearing, and back to those themes of distance, darkness, and emotional separation that run throughout the album. Adam also ties this in with An Ocean in Between the Waves, with the "it never gets too dark to find anybody at any timeline." That echoes that sense of searching, of trying to hold on to something that's already slipping away. This is where Adam ties everything together, not just the album's themes, but his own emotional journey. By the final verse, there's a real sense of distance and acceptance. He knows things have changed, he's changed, and now he's looking back from a place that feels safer. The song ends by Adam moving in reverse into a new chapter, and as the track fades out, it almost feels like a quiet rebirth. The ambience during the outro could be a metaphor of that, to give closure that the relationship is over. That chapter has closed, and what's left is this sense of healing, of finally finding some kind of peace. It's honestly one of the greatest breakup songs ever written, and one of my favourite album closers of all time. There's something so special about this record. It's one I've come back to again and again, whether I'm feeling happy or sad. And like I said earlier, it's given me so much comfort over the years. It's an album I'll keep returning to for the joy, the beauty, and even the sadness for a long, long time to come. Before I wrap up this episode, I just want to take a moment to talk about the impact and legacy of Lost in the Dream. When this album was released back in 2014, it was met with widespread critical acclaim. It appeared on countless end-of-year lists, and not just that, it was actually named Album of the Year by several major publications. Across all of those lists, it was consistently ranked as one of the very best records of that year. And I think what makes that even more impressive is that this wasn't some big mainstream pop release. This was an indie record, but it didn't feel small. It felt expansive. It felt cinematic. It felt important. This album really pushed the boundaries of what an indie rock record could sound like in the 2010s. It blended Americana, classic rock, psychedelia, shoegaze, and dream pop with electronic elements in a way that felt completely fresh, but also timeless at the same time. And its influence is still being felt today. Artists like Sam Fender has spoken openly about how much this record means to them. He's even said that Lost in the Dream was one of the only albums he listened to during a really difficult period in his life, and that Adam Granduciel is one of his biggest heroes. And it's not just Sam Fender either. You can hear that influence across modern rock and indie, from artists working directly with Adam, like The Killers, who collaborated with Adam on their Imploding the Mirage record, and more recently, Miley Cyrus on her underrated release from last year, Something Beautiful. Adam even played guitar on the Beyoncé track, Two Most Wanted, from her Cowboy Carter record. Sam Fender got his wish to collaborate with his musical hero on his Mercury Prize and Brit Award winning record, People Watching. Adam is credited as a co-producer and got involved with the arrangements on the record with Sam. So not only is Adam in demand as a guest session musician, but his style, craft and musicianship is so respected in the music industry. And this record was the critical and commercial breakthrough to give the war on drugs that exposure that they deserved. For me, Lost in the Dream isn't just one of the best albums of 2014, it's one of the defining records of the 2010s. It's an album that connected with people on a really deep level. It captured something honest, something human, and that's why it's lasted. And that's why, over 10 years later, we're still talking about it. I just want to give a quick shout out to Jerry and Babby from the Boytime channel on YouTube. They reacted to the Lost in the Dream record a few years ago. I sent the boys a comment and asked them to check out the war on drugs, and I got my wish. Honestly, their reaction is a joy to watch, and please give them a follow because their content is top tier. I will link their channel in the description if you're listening on YouTube. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. If you've enjoyed it, I'd really appreciate it if you could follow, like or share, as it helps other music lovers discover my podcast. If you're listening on YouTube, don't forget to like this episode and subscribe to the Indie Pop Girl podcast. It really helps the algorithm push the video out to more people, and as a small independent podcast that's still growing, every like and subscription genuinely makes a huge difference. I'm posting full episodes, shorts and little teasers over there, so there's always something new to watch. Let me know in the comments if you love The War on Drugs and if Lost in the Dream is your favourite album from them. I always read and respond to comments and I love hearing what you all think. You can also find me on Instagram and Threads at The Indie Pop Girl and on TikTok at The Indie Pop Girl Podcast. And if you want to dive even deeper, there's a public Spotify playlist called Favourite Tracks from Podcast Episodes, where I add some of my top picks from each record I cover. It's updated as new episodes drop, so you might just find your next obsession. I'll be back very soon and I'll be introducing my new series. Please make sure you are following me on my socials as I'll be teasing the next episode shortly. In the meantime, please check out my previous episodes. There is a variety of different artists and records to catch up on. Until then, I'm Rachel, the Indie Pop Girl. Thanks for listening, take care, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.